Welcome to Reality Check. I'm Ross Coulthart on assignment for NewsNation in America. Today we're in Arizona on a story I can't tell you about, but I can assure you it's a goodie. So back in November last year at the Seoul conference, I interviewed Tim Gallaudet, a former admiral in the US Navy and also an oceanographer with the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. He told me why he believes the UAP cover-up is real. So today, here's an opportunity for you to hear the full interview, including sections of the interview we recorded but couldn't air last year because of time. I hope you enjoy it. Tim Gallaudet has spent a career serving his country. First in the Navy, working in areas like aircraft carrier combat operations and assisting Navy SEAL teams during counter-terrorism operations, according to his official biography. More recently, he served as acting administrator of the Commerce Department's agency, which forecasts weather and monitors ocean and atmospheric conditions, where he analysed the science behind weather and other phenomena. So, Tim, you've said publicly that you think UFOs, UAPs, are the story of the century. Now, I happen to agree with you, but why do you say that?
Oh, absolutely. We're being visited by non-human intelligence with technology we really don't understand, and with intentions we don't understand at all either. And this is just one of those great big questions. Are we alone or not? And we're learning we're not.
Now, that really does surprise me to hear that from a former very high-ranking flag officer in the US Navy, to actually say you're stating categorically that you believe NHI, non-human intelligence, are real.
Absolutely, I do.
Why do you say that?
Well, for a number of reasons that have been coming out. Congress has been informed and they've drafted legislation and they've passed legislation, for example, to establish a DoD office to look at it. They've done the same, NASA did the same with a UAP study team, and we know from the UAP hearing this summer that there are crash retrieval programs, and I have 100% confidence that the testimony by David Grusch and the other witnesses is accurate.
Wow, that's a big thing for you to say that, isn't it?
It is. It's astonishing, and that's why I wrote that article in The Hill. I don't understand why more people are not interested in this. I mystify the lack of intellectual curiosity.
You know, the moment for me was the Schumer Amendment, when the Senate Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer, put into proposed legislation language referring to non-human intelligence over 20 times.
Exactly. That's the statement. And Congress doesn't act at that level without information. Clearly,
you believe there's a cover-up.
Yes.
Why are they covering it up? I mean, you're probably one of the more highly cleared public officials from the military, past serving, who's basically come out publicly and said, you think this is real. Why do you think there is this cover-up? What are they concealing?
Well, sure, this is technology we're still trying to learn about, and it could give us an advantage in any military conflict. And so that's a good reason to not disclose the nature of the technology. And I think for the foreseeable future, we don't want to release and disclose all of the technology that we've recovered. However, I think it's about time that we do disclose that we are in contact with non-human intelligence. That's what needs to be put out there in the public.
You very prominently sat right behind Ryan Graves in the House Oversight hearing earlier this year. You made a point of being seen to support Ryan Graves, the former fighter pilot, David Fravor, the former fighter pilot, and David Grusch, the former Pentagon intelligence officer for the NGIA. Why did you take such a public position?
Right. Well, all those officers are speaking out about the phenomena and the need to study it scientifically more and take policy measures. For example, Ryan stood up a nonprofit called the Americans for Safe Aerospace with a very worthy mission to release more information and get pilots to start reporting and really understand the nature of UAP for aerospace safety. That's a very worthy cause. Now, one of my jobs in the Navy, I was the chief meteorologist of the Navy at the time when Ryan was encountering the UAP off the U.S. East Coast. And when I saw that these were occurring, and I think it's people know that I received a secret email with the Go Fast video attached to it from my boss's operations officer, where I learned now that these were happening and occurring in training airspace and causing near midair collisions. So that safety issue is important, and I couldn't believe, well, I understood why, but the Navy didn't do anything about that, and then they actually pulled back that email from my computer on the secret network because of the classification issues that we were just talking about.
Shouldn't there be, I mean, philosophically, shouldn't it be really important that somebody certainly at your level in the Navy be allowed to talk openly to your colleagues about the flight safety risks that these kind of things are posing?
Absolutely, absolutely. This is a safety issue.
So why do you think they tried to suppress knowledge of that video?
Well, it's the overclassification issue that we've touched on, that these UAP and the crash retrieval objects are classified, and it's really kind of a Cold War legacy of overclassification.
Tim, I have to say, I think a lot of people sitting back home will be scratching their heads going, wow, a former flag officer in the US Navy, a former Rear Admiral, is talking about the existence of a non-human intelligence. They're probably baffled as to why you've reached that conclusion. Is there something you know from your briefings as an officer, secret intelligence that you obtained? How have you come by this conclusion?
A few reasons for that, Ross. First off, I had a job where I was the superintendent of the U.S. Naval Observatory, and I had a team of astrophysicists that monitored the stars and made star catalogs. And I learned a lot about astrophysics then, and I came to appreciate how large the universe is. And you just cannot conclude when you know that there's 200 to 300 billion stars in our galaxy and there's hundreds of billions of galaxies. To think that we're alone is incredibly arrogant, for one. And then two, as I mentioned, I saw on a secret email the Go Fast video in 2015, I believe, and then I knew that was not our technology.
Are you disappointed that the US government's not doing more data-driven empirical research investigating UAPs?
I am. I think it's time now, and with the Seoul Foundation coming out in its inaugural symposium here, this is exactly what we're trying to do, is make policy recommendations to the US government to begin more systematic scientific study of UAP in a number of ways. And what Seoul is looking at is both hard science, trying to acquire some of the materials we have from the crash retrieval program so we can learn more about that technology, which could have incredible benefits to society, as well as some of the humanities aspects. So things like sociology and anthropology and some of the, I guess, ethics issues possibly.
The problem, Tim, is that a lot of the government is still in absolute denial. I mean, you talk as a fact about a crash retrieval program, and we're talking here about retrieved non-human technology, aren't we?
Yes.
And yet there are people in the government, like until very recently the Pentagon's spokesperson on UAPs, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, is still saying he's seen no credible evidence of this phenomena. What do you say to that?
So what you have going on right now are, again, legacy classified programs, special access programs, and without congressional direction and White House policy, that's not going to change. And so I don't criticize, for example, Sean Kirkpatrick, because he's just a good soldier doing what he's told to do. The people there has to be legislation, so the Schumer Amendment is just a must-do. And then there has to be the White House issuing policy. And right now, it's not coming from Kirkpatrick, it's coming from the White House, because the DoD, the Secretary of Defense, doesn't do anything that is counter to the White House policy. And they've obviously, to me, have decided on a policy of non-disclosure.
Can I ask you this? I can understand why it might be decided by very senior people in the Defense Department that we shouldn't reveal technology because it's a weapon, a potential weapon. It's a potential advantage in a future war. You can understand that, can't you?
Absolutely. I think some of the technology should remain classified. We don't want it to get in the hands of our adversaries. However, the fact that we're being visited by non-human intelligence, that is what I think needs to be disclosed. Now, granted, it's not an easy thing for a government to do, because then they're going to admit that they don't really know what they are or their intentions, and it makes us look vulnerable. True. But I think as a society, we're ready for this. We've turned that corner.
Why is the Seoul Foundation so important?
Right. So we're at a time now where previously UAP have been pretty much received stigma and skepticism. And we're changing that. We're at an inflection point in our understanding of this phenomena. And SOL is coming out now to advance the scientific study, the education for the public, collaborative sharing of insights from academia, and then policy recommendations to encourage transparency by our government.
What sort of research would you like SOL to do?
Well, I'm of course interested in the technology aspects of the UAP phenomena. That's fascinating to me, but there are other elements again. I mean, the sociocultural, I guess, implications are great. We're not alone. This is what we're learning. That in itself is something worthy of deep and great study.
You know, it's amazing. I think a lot of us watching on would think that somebody at your level of seniority in the US Navy and then in NOAA, I would have thought you would have been briefed into something like this program.
Oh, no. Their special access programs are very tightly restricted. And so you have to look at what one's job is and that need to know, right? If they have a classification or a clearance at a certain level, and then do they have a need to know? Those are the two prerequisites. In my job as the oceanographer of the Navy, for example, it really wouldn't have made sense for me to have been read into these crash retrieval programs.
The obvious question then is, clearly the government knows a lot more than it's letting on. Here's SOL starting out doing virgin research, and yet the best research is probably hidden inside some of these special access programs. Would you like to see the government sharing more of that data?
Absolutely, and that's the purpose of the Schumer Amendment. And that's what we want to see, is we want this panel that it directs to convene and review these programs and make a determination on what can be released or disclosed without compromising national security.
Now, Tim, I don't think it's a coincidence that the jet fighter pilots who came forward are US Navy. There's a lot of US Navy behind the push for transparency. Is the US Navy more switched on to the need for transparency and disclosure on the UAP issue than the, say, let's guess, the Air Force perhaps?
Well, the statistics of disclosure certainly make that the case. And we've seen that with Ryan Graves and David Fravor, for example, Alex Dietrich.
Why is the US Navy different from the US Air Force on disclosure?
Right. Well, I think Chris Mellon wrote an op-ed, I believe it was in Politico, but you'll have to check, about this, about the Air Force not disclosing at a level like the Navy. And I'd speculate, but having been in the Navy for 32 years and knowing how the two services operate, I think it's safe to say there's the cultural differences. You have a service culture in the Navy that is about going out to sea at ships and having to make decisions on your own without higher headquarters permission. Whereas the Air Force, being located at bases primarily, and many of them are in the U.S., there's more of a hierarchical mindset. And so they are just afraid to basically make a bold statement about what they know.
So it's official. Sailors are more honest than flight flyers.
I don't know about honesty, but I'll say they're less risk averse.
Tim Gallaudet, thanks very much.
Thank you, Ross.
Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And please don't forget to click that red subscribe button to ensure you get more of NewsNation's unbiased and fact-driven news coverage.